Vextar pressed his long fingers against the cold metal of the observation deck. His large eyes watched the blue and green planet below. Earth, the humans called it. He had been watching this world for 5 years now. Every day brought new questions about the strange creatures living on its surface. The monitoring station floated in space, hidden from human eyes. It looked like a small moon to anyone who might see it. Inside, beings from different worlds worked together. They all had one job: watch the humans and learn about them. Vextar's skin was pale blue and smooth. His people, the Milani, had never known war. They solved problems by sharing thoughts directly from mind to mind. Fighting was something they read about in old books, not something they did. "Vexitar, come look at this," called Zilnoth from across the room. The Korthak warrior was bigger than everyone else on the station. His red skin was covered in thick scales. Even his people, who were known as fighters, thought humans were too violent. Vextar walked over to the screen. On it, they could see a human military base. Soldiers in green clothes were training. They carried weapons and practiced fighting moves. "Look how they train their young," Zilnoth said. His voice was deep and rough. "They teach children to kill before they can even think properly." On the screen, a female soldier was showing others how to use a rifle. Her name tag said Yuna in human letters. She moved with quick, sharp movements. Her eyes were always watching for danger, even during practice. "My people fight with honor," Zilnoth continued. "We have rules. We respect our enemies. But humans? They fight like wild animals." Vextar nodded slowly. He had seen many examples of human violence. Wars that lasted for years. Weapons that could destroy entire cities. Soldiers who killed without thinking. But something else bothered him. Sometimes he saw humans doing kind things too. The same soldiers who trained to kill would also save people from burning buildings. The same hands that held weapons would help children who were hurt. "Sir, you need to see this," said another voice. It was Quintar, a young Milani who worked with the computers. His thin fingers moved over the controls, and new images appeared on the screen. This time they were watching a different part of Earth. A place where humans lived in tall buildings made of metal and glass. The humans called it Sol. In the streets below, millions of humans moved around like tiny insects. "I found something interesting in their communication signals," Quintar said. "This human male leads a military unit." The screen showed a man in uniform. His name was Minho. He had short black hair and serious eyes. Yesterday his unit was training for combat, but today the same unit is helping people whose homes were destroyed by water from heavy rain. They are using their war training to save lives. Vextar leaned closer to the screen. This was the thing that confused him most about humans. They could switch from being warriors to being helpers in just one day. "It makes no sense," said another voice. This came from Yilnara, a being whose people looked like tall, thin trees. "My species learned long ago that violence leads only to more violence. We gave up fighting and became peaceful. That is how civilized beings should act." "The humans are not civilized," Zilnoth said firmly. "They still fight each other over small pieces of land. They kill animals for food when they could eat plants. They make weapons instead of art." Vextar looked at the reports on his desk. 5 years of watching humans had given him many files to read. Stories of human wars, human crimes, human anger. But also stories of human kindness, human love, human sacrifice for others. "Perhaps," Vexitar said slowly, "we are missing something." The others turned to look at him. It was rare for Vexitar to question their conclusions. "What do you mean?" asked Yilnara. "Look at their planet," Vextar said, pointing to the main screen. "Earth is dangerous. They have storms that can destroy cities, animals that hunt them, diseases that kill them. Even their ground shakes and breaks apart sometimes." The others nodded. Earth was known to be what they called a death world, a planet where life was hard and dangerous. "Every other species we know evolved on safe worlds," Vextar continued. "We learned to be peaceful because we could be peaceful. But humans had to fight just to stay alive. Maybe their violence is not evil. Maybe it is just how they learned to survive." "Survival or not," Zilnoth said, "they are too dangerous to join the Galactic Council. Can you imagine what would happen if we gave weapons to beings who fight like this?" Vextar nodded, but he was not sure. Something about humans was different. Yes, they were violent, but they were also brave in ways that other species were not. They would risk their lives to save strangers. They would fight impossible battles just because they thought it was right. On the screen, Yuna was now teaching young soldiers how to help wounded people. The same hands that learned to hold weapons also learned to heal injuries. Minho was giving orders to his unit, but Vextar could see kindness in his eyes when he looked at his soldiers. "Sir," Quintar said suddenly. His voice was worried. "I am detecting something strange." "What is it?" Vextar asked. "Energy readings from the edge of the solar system. Something large is coming toward Earth." All the beings in the room stopped what they were doing. Vextar felt his blood become cold. He knew what those energy readings meant. Every being in the galaxy knew those readings. "How many ships?" he asked quietly. Quintar's fingers moved quickly over his controls. Numbers appeared on the screen. Then more numbers. Then more. I cannot count them all," Quintar said. His voice was shaking. "There are thousands. Maybe more." Vextar closed his eyes. After 5 years of watching humans, learning about them, arguing about whether they were civilized or not, it no longer mattered. The Devourers had found Earth. The Devourers were the nightmare of the galaxy. They were not like other species. They did not want to trade or talk or make peace. They only wanted to consume. Every planet they found, they destroyed. Every species they met, they killed. The Galactic Council had been running from them for hundreds of years. Entire civilizations had been lost. Billions of beings had died. And now they had found the humans. "How long until they reach Earth?" Vextar asked. 3 days, Quintar answered. Vextar looked at the screen again. Yuna was still training her soldiers. Minho was still leading his unit. They had no idea what was coming for them. They did not know that their blue sky would soon be filled with ships that wanted to kill them all. "Should we warn them?" asked Yilnara. "The Council forbids contact with primitive species," Zilnoth said. "We can only watch and record their destruction," Vextar said quietly. He thought about all the reports he had written about human violence. All the times he had said they were too dangerous for civilized space. Now in 3 days, none of it would matter. The humans would be dead, and their violent, confusing, beautiful world would be empty. Vextar pressed his hand against the cold metal again. Below him, millions of humans continued their lives. They worked, they loved, they fought, they helped each other. They had no idea that their time was almost over. For the first time in 5 years of watching Earth, Vextar wished he could do more than just observe. The first Devourer ships appeared in Earth's sky like black clouds. Vextar watched from his observation post as the massive vessels blocked out the sun over major human cities. Each ship was larger than a mountain, their dark metal surfaces covered in weapons that had destroyed 1,000 worlds. "It begins," Zilnoth said quietly. The big Korthak warrior stood next to Vextar, his red scales darker than usual. "By tomorrow it will be over." Vextar said nothing. He had seen the Devourers attack before. First came the fear broadcasts, signals that made other species panic and run. Then came the bioweapons that weakened their enemies. Finally came the ground troops that finished what was left. Every species in the galaxy knew this pattern. Every species had tried to fight it. Every species had failed. On the main screen, they watched human cities as the black ships appeared overhead. Vextar expected to see panic. He expected to see humans running and screaming like every other species did when the Devourers came. Instead, he saw something different. Air raid sirens wailed across the human cities. But instead of running in fear, humans moved with purpose. Soldiers ran to their posts. Civilians moved to shelters in organized groups. Children were led to safety by calm adults who spoke in steady voices. "Look at their military response," Quintar said from his computer station. "Their ships are actually moving toward the Devourer fleet, not away from it." On the screen, they could see human aircraft rising from airfields around the world. Small, fast fighters that looked like insects compared to the massive Devourer ships. It seemed hopeless, foolish, Yilnara whispered. They should surrender now and ask for mercy. "The Devourers do not give mercy," Vextar said. He had studied them for decades. They consume everything, always. The first battle began over the Pacific Ocean. Human ships fired missiles at the Devourer vessels while aircraft attacked from above. The alien ships returned fire with weapons that could melt metal and turn rock to dust. Vextar watched as human ships exploded, and aircraft fell from the sky like burning stars. It was terrible and hopeless, just like always. But then something happened that he had never seen before. A small human fighter plane, its engines smoking and wings damaged, flew directly at one of the larger Devourer ships. Instead of trying to escape, the pilot aimed straight for the alien vessel's main weapon. "What is that human doing?" Quintar asked. The damaged fighter crashed into the Devourer ship's primary cannon just as the alien weapon was charging. The explosion was so bright that their screens went white for a moment. When the light faded, the massive Devourer ship was breaking apart, pieces of it falling toward the ocean. "Impossible," Zilnoth breathed. "One small ship destroyed a capital vessel?" On the communication channels, they could hear the human pilot's final words. "This is Captain Jiwan, target destroyed. Tell my daughter I love her." Vextar felt something strange in his chest. The human had known she would die. She had chosen to die to damage the enemy, not because she was forced to, but because she decided it was the right thing to do. "Pull up the identification on that pilot," he said to Quintar. Numbers and letters appeared on the screen. Captain Jiwan was 28 years old. She had a 5-year-old daughter named Mira. She had been a pilot for 6 years. Yesterday, she had been teaching young pilots how to fly safely. Today, she had flown her plane into an alien warship to save her world. "The humans are fighting back harder than expected," Zilnoth admitted, "but they cannot win. There are too many Devourer ships," he was right. Even with their surprising resistance, the humans were losing badly. For every Devourer ship they destroyed, 10 more took its place. For every small victory, they paid with hundreds of lives, but they kept fighting. Over the next hours, Vextar watched battle after battle. In each one, humans did things that made no sense. They fought when they should have run. They attacked when they should have hidden. They refused to give up even when their situation was hopeless. In Korea, a ground commander named Tae-hyun was leading the defense of Seoul. His forces were completely surrounded by Devourer ground troops. The alien soldiers were bigger, stronger, and had better weapons. Any other species would have surrendered. Instead, Taehyun's soldiers used the city itself as a weapon. They collapsed buildings to block alien advances. They flooded subway tunnels to trap enemy forces. They used everything from kitchen knives to construction equipment as weapons when their guns ran out of ammunition. "Look at this," Quintar said, pointing to another screen. "This human unit has been fighting for 16 hours without rest. They have no food, no water, and they are almost out of ammunition, but they are still fighting." The unit was led by a sergeant named Wu Jin. His soldiers were young, some barely adults. They were tired, hungry, and scared. But when Devourer forces attacked their position, they fought back with everything they had. Vextar watched as Wu Jin shared his last water bottle with a wounded soldier. Then he picked up a rifle and returned to the battle. These humans were facing certain death, but they still took care of each other. "I do not understand them," Yilnara said. "Why do they not surrender? Why do they choose to die fighting instead of living as prisoners?" "Because," Vexitar said slowly, "I do not think they know how to give up." On Earth's surface, the pattern was the same everywhere. Human military forces that should have been destroyed in hours were still fighting after a full day. Civilians who should have been helpless were building weapons in their homes and fighting alongside soldiers. In one city, a group of factory workers led by a woman named Soyeon had turned their manufacturing plant into a fortress. They were making ammunition and medical supplies for the soldiers, while also fighting off Devourer attacks on their own. Soyeon had been a supervisor who made cars before the invasion. Now she was organizing the defense of an entire district, leading people who had never held weapons before. "Sir," Quintar said urgently, "the Devourer commanders are sending more ships to Earth." "How many more?" Vextar asked. "All of them. The entire fleet is moving to Earth's system." Vextar felt cold again. The Devourers had never needed their entire fleet to destroy a world before. Usually, the first wave was enough to break any resistance. "The humans have made the Devourers angry," Zilnoth said. "This is not good. When the Devourers get angry, they do not just kill, they make sure that nothing is left behind." On the screens, they could see the massive alien fleet moving closer to Earth. Thousands of ships, each one capable of destroying a city. Against them, the humans had only a few hundred ships left, and most of those were damaged. But the humans were still broadcasting messages to each other. Military communications, civilian reports, families trying to find each other, and in every message Vextar heard the same thing: determination. They were not giving up. A new voice came over the communication channels. It was a human commander speaking to all the forces on Earth. This is General Minjin of the United Earth Defense. I know things look bad. I know we are outnumbered, but we are not defeated. Every ship we destroy, every hour we delay them gives our scientists more time to find a weakness. Keep fighting. Make them pay for every meter of ground. Show them what happens when they threaten Earth. The response from human forces around the world was immediate. Voices from every continent speaking different languages, all saying the same thing. Yes, sir. We will fight. Vextar looked at his fellow observers. They were all staring at the screens in confusion. This was not how invasions were supposed to go. The humans should have broken by now. They should have surrendered or fled or simply given up hope. Instead, after one full day of fighting, they seemed angrier and more determined than when the battle started. Perhaps, Vextar said quietly, we have been watching the wrong species all these years. What do you mean? Zilnoth asked. We thought the humans were primitive because they fight so much. But maybe they fight so much because they are not primitive at all. Maybe they fight because they understand something that we do not. What could they understand that we do not? Yilnara asked. Vextar watched as another human pilot flew her damaged ship into a devourer vessel. As another group of soldiers charged an impossible position. As another civilian picked up a weapon to defend her home. Maybe, he said, they understand that some things are worth dying for. On the second day of the invasion, Vextar watched something that changed everything he thought he knew about war. A human medic named Huna was running across a battlefield where devourer and human soldiers were still shooting at each other. She carried a red bag with medical supplies and wore a white uniform with a red cross symbol. The devourers were firing their weapons at anything that moved. Huna should have been hiding. Instead, she was running toward the shooting. What is she doing? Quintar asked, zooming in the camera to follow her. They watched as Huna reached a wounded human soldier. She knelt down next to him and began treating his injuries, even though energy blasts from alien weapons were hitting the ground around her. But then she did something that made Vextar's breath catch in his throat. A wounded devourer soldier was lying just a few meters away. The alien creature was clearly dying, its dark blood pooling around its broken body. Huna looked at it for a moment, then picked up her medical bag and crawled over to the enemy soldier. She is treating the enemy, Yilnara whispered in disbelief. The devourer soldier tried to bite her when she came close. Its species had never shown mercy to anyone. But Huna just moved out of the way and kept working on its wounds. Other human soldiers saw what she was doing. Instead of stopping her or shooting the alien, they formed a circle around her to protect her while she worked. I have never seen this before, Zilnoth said. His voice was quiet and confused. In all my studies of warfare, I have never seen soldiers protect someone who was helping their enemy. Vextar could not answer. He was too busy watching Huna save the life of a creature whose people were trying to destroy her world. Across the planet, humans were doing impossible things every hour. In Tokyo, an engineer named Seokjin had been captured when devourer forces overran his city. But instead of being killed, he was taken to one of their forward bases. The aliens wanted to study human technology. Seokjin was supposed to be a prisoner. Instead, he was taking apart devourer weapons and learning how they worked. Look at this, Quintar said, showing Vextar the surveillance from inside the alien base. This human has been a prisoner for only 6 hours. But he has already figured out how their energy weapons function. On the screen, they could see Seokjin working with simple tools he had made from pieces of metal. His hands moved quickly and carefully as he took apart an alien rifle. His eyes were focused and calm, as if he was working in his own laboratory instead of an enemy prison. The devourers think he is just fixing their broken equipment, Quintar continued. But watch what he is really doing. Seokjin was not just fixing the weapons. He was changing them, small modifications that the alien guards could not see, but that would make the weapons work differently. He is sabotaging them, Vextar realized. But more than that, he is learning from them. That afternoon, Seokjin escaped from the prison, but he did not just run away. He took with him detailed knowledge of how devourer technology worked. Within hours, human factories were producing new weapons based on what he had learned. 6 hours, Zilnoth said, shaking his head. It took my people 6 months to understand devourer technology when we first encountered them. This human did it in 6 hours. But the thing that amazed Vextar most was not how quickly humans learned. It was how quickly they taught each other. Everything Seokjin learned he immediately shared with other humans. Within a day, Engineers across the planet were building weapons that used alien technology. Soldiers were learning new tactics based on alien weaknesses that Seokjin had discovered. They share knowledge like my people share thoughts, Vextar said. But they do it by choice, not because they are connected. In rural areas where the main armies could not reach, ordinary humans were forming their own fighting groups. A farmer named Nari had organized her entire village into a resistance cell. These were people who had never been soldiers, teachers, shopkeepers, students, grandparents. Nari had been a high school history teacher before the invasion. Now she was leading ambush attacks against Devourer supply convoys. Watch how she moves, Silnoth said, studying the tactical displays. She has no formal military training, but her strategies are sound. How is this possible? Vextar thought he was beginning to understand. Maybe all humans are soldiers. Maybe their whole species evolved to fight. It was not just that humans were good at war. They seemed to be good at every kind of war. Regular soldiers fought in organized battles. Engineers turned everyday objects into weapons. Medics saved lives while under fire. Civilians became guerrilla fighters overnight. Each human found their own way to fight back. A group of computer programmers led by a young man named Jungsu had somehow broken into Devourer communication systems. They were sending false orders to alien units, making them attack each other by mistake. Scientists were working around the clock to develop new defenses. Artists were creating propaganda that kept human morale high. Even children were helping by carrying messages and supplies to fighters in dangerous areas. This is not normal, Ilnara said. When my people face danger, we seek consensus. We discuss the problem until we all agree on a solution. But humans, they just start fighting immediately. Each one finds their own way to help. Because they do not have time for discussion, Vextar realized. On their world, danger could come at any moment. A storm, a predator, an earthquake. They had to learn to respond instantly without waiting for others to tell them what to do. On the screens, he could see the truth of this everywhere. Human commanders gave general orders, but individual soldiers made their own decisions about how to follow them. No two human units fought exactly the same way, because each one adapted to their specific situation. The Devourers, who were used to fighting predictable enemies, were having trouble with this. Their tactics worked against species that followed patterns. But humans seemed to have no patterns at all. In Korea, Commander Taehyun was still defending Seoul with forces that should have been destroyed a day ago. But every time the aliens thought they understood his strategy, he changed it. First, his soldiers fought from the buildings. Then they fought from the sewers. Then they fought from the subway tunnels. Each time they used different weapons and different tactics. He is not following any military doctrine that I recognize, Zilnoth said. It is as if he is making up new strategies every hour. Maybe he is, Vextar replied. Maybe that is what humans do. They create solutions that no one has ever tried before. That evening, Vextar received a priority message from the Galactic Council. The message was short and clear. Prepare to evacuate observation post. Devour victory on Earth expected within hours. Do not interfere with natural extinction process. Vextar looked at the message for a long time. Then he looked at the screen showing human cities still full of lights, human soldiers still fighting, human families still hoping. Natural extinction process, he repeated quietly. But nothing about what he was seeing looked natural. The humans were not just fighting back. They were learning and adapting faster than any species he had ever studied. They were turning every disadvantage into an advantage. When their aircraft were shot down, they built new ones. When their weapons broke, they made better ones. When their soldiers were killed, civilians took their place. Vexitar, Quintar said urgently. Something is happening. On the main screen, they could see human forces around the world beginning a coordinated attack. But this was not like the desperate fighting of the past 2 days. This was organized, planned, and using weapons that had not existed a week ago. Where did they get those designs? Hilnara asked, looking at the new human weapons. From us, Vextar said slowly. They took Devourer technology, human creativity, and combined them into something new. For the first time since the invasion began, human forces were not just defending. They were attacking, and they were winning. Vextar watched as group after group of Devourer soldiers retreated from positions they had held for 2 days. The aliens were confused, disorganized, and for the first time in galactic history they were afraid. The humans are pushing them back, Quintar said in amazement. How is this possible? Vextar looked at his fellow observers. They were all staring at the screens in shock. This was not supposed to happen. No species had ever fought the Devourers to a standstill. But humans were not just fighting them to a standstill. They were winning, I think, Vextar said quietly. We have been asking the wrong question. What do you mean? Zilnoth asked. We have been asking why humans are so violent, but maybe we should be asking why the rest of us are so peaceful. On the third day, the Devourers did something they had never done before in galactic history. They used their final weapon. Vextar watched the alien ships release clouds of green gas over every human city. The bioplague spread quickly through the air, invisible and deadly. It was designed to break down the will to fight in any living creature. Now it ends, Zilnoth said quietly. No species has ever survived the bioplague. The plague was not just a weapon that killed. It was worse than that. It made its victims lose hope. It made them give up. Every other species that had faced this weapon simply stopped fighting and waited to die. Vextar had seen it happen before. Proud warrior races that became helpless within hours. Peaceful civilizations that accepted death without resistance. The bioplague took away the one thing that kept any species fighting. The belief that they could win. Within hours, the plague had spread across Earth. Humans began falling sick in massive numbers. Their hospitals filled up. Their military units lost soldiers faster than they could replace them. But something strange happened. The humans did not stop fighting. This makes no sense, Yilnara said, studying the medical readings from Earth's surface. The bioplague should have broken their will to resist. They should be surrendering right now. Instead, human forces that were sick and dying were still attacking Devourer positions. Soldiers who could barely stand were still carrying weapons. Civilians who were coughing blood were still building defenses. In a field hospital in Seoul, a doctor named Woo Jin was working on finding a cure for the plague while he was sick with it himself. His hands shook from fever, but he kept working with his microscope and test tubes. Look at this, Quintar said, zooming in on the hospital. This human has been infected for 12 hours. According to our data, he should be completely helpless by now. But Woo Jin was not helpless. He was dying, but he was still thinking. His body was breaking down, but his mind was still working on the problem. I have found something, he said to his assistant, a young woman named Heejin who was also sick with the plague. The alien disease attacks our brain chemistry, but not all at once. If we can boost certain chemicals in our bodies, we might be able to slow it down. How do we do that? Heejin asked. With medicines we already have, Woo Jin replied. Simple drugs that we use for other diseases. If we combine them in the right way, within hours Woo Jin's partial cure was being produced in hidden factories around the world. It did not stop the plague completely, but it gave infected humans more time before they became too weak to fight. More importantly, it gave them hope. They are adapting to our ultimate weapon, Zilnoth said in disbelief. This should be impossible. But humans were doing many impossible things. In the ruins of Tokyo, a military commander named Soyeon was leading a counterattack, even though half her soldiers were infected with the plague. They moved slowly and had to rest often, but they kept advancing. Ma'am, one of her soldiers said, maybe we should wait until more of us recover. We do not have time to wait, Soyeon replied. Every hour we delay, more of our people die. We fight now with what we have. Her soldiers nodded and followed her into battle. They were weak from sickness, but they were still soldiers. Vextar watched this scene and felt something he had never experienced before. Among his people, when someone was sick, the community took care of them until they were well. The idea of fighting while sick was completely foreign. But humans seemed to fight harder when they were hurt. Sir, Quintar said urgently, I am receiving communications from Galactic Council Fleet. Vextar turned to listen. The message came through their quantum communicator in the cold voice of High Admiral Tizentar. Observation Team 7. Prepare for immediate evacuation. Devourer bioplague has been deployed on target world. Human extinction will be complete within 6 hours. Council fleets are retreating to Defense Line Gamma. Vextar looked at the screens showing Earth. 6 hours? The humans had been fighting the plague for 3 days and were still holding major cities. Request permission to continue observations, Vextar said into the communicator. Denied. All observation teams are ordered to withdraw. The human experiment is over. Experiment? Vextar felt anger rise in his chest. These are living beings, not experiments. Vextar, came another voice through the communicator. It was Counselor Velthar from the Council. Your reports about human resistance have been noted. But resistance is not victory. The bioplague has never failed. The humans will break soon. What if they do not break? Vextar asked. Then they will die fighting and the result will be the same. The communication ended. Vextar stared at the dead speaker for a moment, then turned back to the screens. On Earth's surface, the impossible was continuing to happen. A factory worker named Jae-Wan was leading a group of infected civilians in an attack on a devourer supply depot. These were not soldiers, they were ordinary people who made cars and computers and furniture before the invasion. Now they were making war. We might not live through this, Jae-Wan told his group as they prepared for the attack. The plague is going to kill us anyway, but maybe we can take some of them with us. My daughter is in the shelter under Building C, said one of the women. If we can destroy this depot, maybe the aliens will not find her. My son is with the resistance in Sector 7, said another man. If we can give them more time. They attacked the depot with tools from their factories and homemade weapons. Most of them died in the assault, but they destroyed the depot and everything in it. Vextar watched dozens of similar attacks happening all over the planet. Humans who knew they were dying were using their deaths as weapons. This is insane, Yilnara said. They are killing themselves. No, Vextar said quietly. They are choosing how they die. That was the difference, he realized. Other species died in despair when the bioplague took away their hope. But humans were not dying in despair. They were dying angry, and they were taking their anger with them into battle. More importantly, they were making sure their deaths meant something. A group of engineers led by a woman named Minji had infected with the plague, but before they died, they programmed a computer virus into devourer systems. The virus would not activate until after they were dead, but when it did, it would shut down alien weapons across the entire planet. We will not live to see if this works, Minji told her team, but our children might. Then that is enough, replied one of her engineers. They died 2 hours later. The virus activated 6 hours after that, just as a major devourer assault was beginning. Alien weapon systems failed across the planet, giving human forces a chance to launch their own. Counterattack Vextar watched this happen and understood something that changed everything. He thought he knew about life and death. The humans were not fighting to live. They were fighting so that other humans could live. Parents fought so their children could survive. Soldiers fought so civilians could escape. Engineers died to give others better weapons. Doctors died to leave behind cures. Each human death made the remaining humans stronger, not weaker. They are not individuals, Vextar said suddenly. What? Zilnoth asked. We have been thinking of humans as individuals like our own species, but they are not. They are more like cells in a larger organism. When some cells die, the organism learns from their sacrifice and becomes stronger. On the screens, he could see the proof of this. Every time a group of humans died fighting, other humans learned from their tactics. Every time a human scientist died, they left behind research that others could use. Every time a human leader was killed, 3 more humans stepped up to take their place. The bioplague was designed to break individual will. But humans were not fighting as individuals. They were fighting as a species, and as a species they were learning to beat the plague. Sir, Quintar said, his voice filled with amazement. Human forces are advancing on all fronts. The Devourers they are retreating. Vextar looked at the tactical displays. For the first time in galactic history, Devourer forces were pulling back from a planet they had invaded, not because they had been defeated in battle, but because they were afraid. The humans had shown them something that no other species ever had, that some beings would rather die fighting than live in surrender, and that made the humans more dangerous than any weapon the Devourers had ever faced. The plague failed, Zilnoth said quietly. Their ultimate weapon failed. No, Vextar corrected him. The plague worked exactly as designed. It killed thousands of humans and weakened thousands more. Then why are the Devourers retreating? Vextar watched as another group of sick and dying humans launched an impossible attack against an alien position. Because, he said, the Devourers finally met something they have never encountered before. What is that? An enemy that becomes more dangerous when it is hurt. 6 months later, Vextar stood on the surface of Earth for the first time. The air smelled of smoke and metal, but also of growing plants. Human cities were being rebuilt around the wreckage of alien ships. Children played games in parks that had been battlefields just months before. It was impossible, but it had happened. The humans had won, not just survived, won. The Devourer fleet had retreated from Earth's solar system completely. For the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy's greatest enemy had been defeated. Ambassador Vexitar, came a voice behind him. He turned to see a human approaching. It was Minsu, the military commander who had coordinated Earth's final victory against the Devourer forces. Minsu looked tired. There were scars on his face from the war, and his left arm was artificial, a replacement for the one he had lost in the fighting. But his eyes were calm and alert. "Commander Minsu," Vexitar replied. He was still getting used to human customs. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." "Just Minsu is fine," the human said with a small smile. "We are not at war anymore." Behind Minsu walked a woman in diplomatic clothes. This was Yunji, who had been a soldier during the invasion but was now Earth's first ambassador to the galaxy. She had learned to speak several alien languages in just a few months. "The Galactic Council is very interested in establishing relations with humanity," Vexitar said as they walked toward the human government building. "Are they?" Yunji asked. Her voice was polite, but Vexitar could hear the question behind it. 6 months ago, they were ready to watch us die without offering help. Vexitar felt shame, an emotion his people rarely experienced. "The Council's policies were wrong. We have learned much from watching your people fight." They walked past a construction site where humans and several alien species were working together. The aliens were refugees from worlds that the Devourers had destroyed years ago. Earth had offered them shelter and help rebuilding their lives. "Your people are helping our refugees," Vexitar observed. "Of course," Minsu said. "They lost their homes fighting the same enemy we fought. Why would we not help them?" This simple answer contained everything that Vexitar had learned about humans in the past months. They did not help others because they expected something in return. They helped because they thought it was right. Inside the government building, they met with more humans who had become leaders after the war. There was Kyung-Soo, the engineer who had learned to build weapons from captured Devourer technology. He was now teaching these techniques to alien engineers from across the galaxy. "The Council wishes to understand how you defeated the Devourers," Vexitar said when they were all seated around a table. "We did not defeat them alone," Yunji replied. "We had help from your observation station. The information you provided about their weaknesses was valuable." Vexitar was confused. "We provided no information." "We were ordered not to interfere," Kyung-Soo smiled. "You provided information just by watching. We knew you were there. We knew you had been studying the Devourers for centuries, so we studied you studying them." "You watched us watching you?" Vexitar asked. "We learned to detect your observation equipment in the first week of the war," Minsu explained. "By watching what you were looking for, we could guess what you thought was important about Devourer tactics. And," Yunji added, "by watching how you reacted to our strategies, we could tell which ones were working and which ones were not." Vexitar realized that humans had been learning from the galactic observers, even while fighting for their lives. They had turned their enemy's own intelligence against them. "But this still does not explain your victory," Vexitar said. "The Devourers had superior numbers, superior weapons, and superior technology." "They did," Kyung-Soo agreed. "But they had one major weakness. What was that? They had never fought anyone like us before." Over the next hour, the humans explained their strategy. It had not been one plan, but thousands of small plans all working together. Every human unit, every civilian group, every individual person had found their own way to fight back. "The Devourers are used to fighting species that think like they do," Minsu explained. "Unified, predictable, following patterns. But humans do not follow patterns. Each of our soldiers is trained to think independently," Yunji added. "Each civilian is taught to take care of themselves. When you fight humans, you are not fighting one army. You are fighting millions of small armies, each one different." "But what about the bioplague?" Vexitar asked. "How did you overcome their ultimate weapon?" "By accepting that we might lose," Kyung-Soo said simply. "Other species fight the plague by trying to stay healthy. We fought it by learning to fight while sick. You chose to keep fighting even when you knew you might die. We chose to make our deaths useful," Minsu corrected. Every human who died fighting taught the rest of us something new about how to beat the Devourers. Vextar thought about this for a long time. Other species saw death as failure. Humans saw death as another tool in their fight for survival. The Council has a request, Vextar said finally. The Devourers are still out there. They have attacked other systems since leaving Earth. We would like human help in fighting them. The humans looked at each other. Then Unji spoke. We will help, she said. But not the way you might expect. What do you mean? You want us to fight for you. But that will not solve the real problem. The real problem is that the rest of the galaxy has forgotten how to fight. So what do you propose? We will teach you, Minsu said. We will send human advisors to your fleets. We will train your soldiers. We will show your people how to think like fighters instead of victims. But most importantly, Kyungsu added, we will teach you that fighting and being civilized are not opposites. You can be both. Over the following months, human teachers spread across the galaxy. They taught alien soldiers how to adapt tactics in the middle of battle. They showed alien engineers how to turn everyday objects into weapons. They trained alien leaders how to inspire their people to fight for what mattered. Most importantly, they taught alien species that losing a battle did not mean losing the war. The results were immediate and dramatic. Galactic Council forces began winning fights against the Devourers for the first time in centuries. Species that had been running and hiding for generations began fighting back. The Devourers, who had grown used to easy victories, found themselves facing enemies who learned from every defeat and came back stronger. Within a year, the tide of the Galactic War had completely turned. Vexitar watched all of this happen from his new position as Earth's liaison to the Galactic Council. He had requested the assignment specifically. After 5 years of watching humans from a distance, he wanted to understand them up close. What he learned surprised him. Humans were not naturally violent. They did not enjoy fighting. Most of them would rather live in peace. But they had learned something that other species had not. Sometimes you have to fight to protect peace. You seem troubled, Yunji said one day as they walked through a park in Seoul. The city had been completely rebuilt, but there were monuments everywhere honoring those who had died defending it. I have been thinking about my reports, Vextar said. For 5 years I wrote that humans were too violent to join civilized society. And now I think we were too civilized to survive in an uncivilized galaxy. They stopped in front of a memorial wall covered with names. Thousands of humans who had died fighting the Devourers. At the bottom of the wall, someone had written a simple message in several languages. They fought so we could live in peace. Do you regret watching us fight? Yunji asked. Vextar thought about this question. He thought about Captain Jiwon, who had flown her fighter into an alien ship to save her world. About Dr. Wu Jin, who had found a cure for the bioplague while dying from it. About all the humans who had chosen to fight impossible odds because they thought it was right. Yes, he said finally. I regret it very much. Why? Because it took us so long to understand what you were really fighting for. What were we fighting for? Vextar looked at the names on the memorial wall. Then he looked at the children playing in the park, the families having picnics, the couples walking together in safety. You were not fighting because you wanted to hurt others, he said. You were fighting because you wanted to protect others. That is the difference between violence and strength. And now the galaxy is learning the difference too. As they walked back toward the government building, Vextar thought about his final report to the Galactic Council. It would be very different from his first reports about humanity. It would say that humans were not too primitive for galactic civilization. It would say that galactic civilization had been too primitive for humans. And it would recommend that every species in the galaxy learn what humans understood, that the greatest strength is not the ability to hurt others, but the willingness to sacrifice yourself to protect others. That night, Vextar wrote in his personal journal, I watched humans fight and now I regret it, not because they were too violent, but because we had been too weak. They showed us that true civilization is not the absence of conflict. It is the courage to fight for what matters, even when the fight seems impossible to win. The next morning, he sent his final report to the Galactic Council. The title was simple, Humanity, an analysis of true strength.